You know, boxing today, it seems like there's news breaking every single day. There's fights being announced almost every day, big fights at that. Boxing's in a good place. And sometimes, I don't know about you guys, but I find it a little bit difficult at times just to stay on top of everything between checking Twitter, checking boxing scene, going on BoxRec to see if there's anything announced. There's a lot to look for. There's a lot of platforms you need to go on. And if you look there on screen, you'll see today's sponsors, Boxing Showtimes. They've made an app that does it all for you. Look at that on screen. It shows you where you can get tickets. It gives you all the latest news. It gives you the tail of the tape. It gives you all the card details. It's going to give you details about Fury Usyk. It's going to give you details about Joshua Ngannou. It's also going to have a lot more little things thrown in there as well. The link is in the comment section. It's going to be pinned on this video and more besides soon enough. And not only that, in the comment section, there's also going to be a link, a G-Man promo, which means you can access a little bit more without ads. Now that, to quote Eddie Hearn, is a game changer. Now let's crack on with the video.
Alright, so Dillian Whyte made his return to the ring last night in Castlebar. Now, as I said, to say a fall from grace. I mean, going from pay-per-view bouts to non-televised bouts in a very small hotel in Castlebar is a bit of a fall from grace. It has to be said. The fight he had with Christian Hammer, I mean, a very, I don't say strange ending, but anticlimactic ending for Dillian Whyte. He wasn't happy. He's clearly not happy with Christian Hammer. But at the end of the day, a win is still a win. It's better to take a win by those means than to take an L by other means. So he probably won't be too worried about that. The question is, now that Dillian Whyte is back, he's in action, what's next for him? And that's a good question. Now again, it's very difficult. From what I've seen in that fight with Christian Hammer, Whyte looked a bit soft. He didn't look the quickest. He didn't look the sharpest. But to be expected. I mean, I'm sure he only really kind of got word this fight was a possibility, or being on this card was a possibility a couple of weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks if even. So you wouldn't imagine he was, ideally prepped. It wasn't like he had 8 to 10 weeks to prepare, knowing who his opponent would be, knowing he's going to, be fighting on this show. So yeah, I understand that he wasn't going to look amazing. If he's ever going to set, we weren't going to be hearing reports the next day of, Dillian Whyte looks, like he rolled back the years to 2018. We're never going to be hearing that. But, we just want to get a gauge where he's at. A bit like another person, Anthony Joshua. Now, with Joshua, we know more where he's at. He's looking very good. The signs are all good. But I would like to see him in there, as I said, with a top 10 opponent. Now, Eddie Hearn has said that there's not really going to be an announcement on what Anthony Joshua is going to do next up until the Fury Usyk fight. And I'm sure Eddie Hearn is crossing everything that Tyson Fury wins, because that's obviously the fight that he wants to do. And it's a fight that, quite frankly, would generate the most amount of money for both parties, Queensberry and Hearn. So obviously Warren wants his guy to win because he wants to have an undisputed champion. He wants to, Fury is Queensberry. And obviously Eddie Hearn wants to put Joshua in there. It's a big fight either way. And if you take an L against Fury, it's not the end of the world, especially if he is undisputed champion. And, if Anthony Joshua wins, sky's the limit. It really is. I'd still like to see him fight Usyk, or not necessarily fight Usyk, but I would still be. It would be like, okay, he beat Fury, but there's Usyk, and what's going to happen with Usyk, and that sort of way. But nevertheless, we cross that bridge when we get to it. In terms of the now, what's going to happen now? Me and Ade talked about Dillian Whyte because he has mentioned Anthony Joshua. Me and Ade talked briefly about Dillian Whyte versus Anthony Joshua a couple of weeks ago when we did our Ngannou special. And I said, look, as much as we may like or dislike it, and I would imagine more people would probably dislike it as opposed to like it, the fact of the matter is that both Joshua and Fury, the two biggest names in British boxing by a country mile, for the foreseeable future, they're going to be fighting out in Saudi. That's just the way it is. For the foreseeable future, that's how it's going to be. They're making the most money out there. Turkey Al Sheikh is paying them insane amounts of money, so they're doing the fights over in Saudi Arabia. In terms of them fighting in the UK, in London, Manchester, wherever, not likely anytime soon. However, although I want to see Anthony Joshua fight a top 10 opponent, Hrgovic, Parker, etc., even Zhang coming off the back of a loss, I wouldn't mind seeing that just to get a gauge. Dillian Whyte, I wouldn't put him in the top 10 anymore. Certainly not since the Fury loss, no. But that fight, for me, if I was looking at it with my promoter's hat on, if I wanted to run a pay-per-view with the Zone in the UK, in the O2, in London, that is a fight that you may look at if you're Eddie Hearn. Now, me and Ade both spoke about it. We were kind of in agreement that if you did do it, there would be a risk because you've done all the work. I mean, Eddie Hearn, Anthony Joshua, Matchroom, everyone put in a lot of effort first time around for the rematch that was going to happen in August, only for it to be pulled at the last minute. You know, Dillian Whyte, obviously Joshua still fought, but it was meant to be Dillian Whyte. It happened a week before the fight. They'd done the face-offs. They'd done all the marketing, the PR, everything, the promotion. And for all that to go pretty much down to Swanee, to have to go on pay-per-view and then bring it back to standard to Zone, because obviously Hellenius was coming in to replace Dillian Whyte, that's got to be a real, a kick in the teeth. And if you're a promoter, you're thinking, as much as I'd like to put you in with my guy, because quite frankly, Joshua beats Dillian Whyte pretty convincingly in my opinion. As much as I'd like to do that, would Eddie Hearn take that risk? Not necessarily with Joshua losing, but the fact that something might happen with Dillian Whyte that you're thinking, goddamn, I don't want to put a pay-per-view on, go through all that rigmarole again, only for something to happen lastminute.com. Now, that would be an idea for Eddie Hearn, though. I would say it. If you wanted to get Joshua back in the UK for maybe one last fight in the UK before he's back over in Saudi for the foreseeable future, that'd be the fight you'd do. If it's not Anthony Joshua, who would it be for Dillian Whyte? And that's a good question. I've heard rumours that they're looking to do Deontay Wilder, Dillian Whyte over in Saudi. And listen, I touched on that briefly in Review of the Week. Yeah, Wilder versus Whyte. I've always fancied Wilder. For whatever reason, they haven't seemed to want that fight. For whatever reason. Certainly that was back when Deontay Wilder was in his, let's say, prime. Certainly when he was a bit more aggressive, letting the right hand go. He didn't seem to want that fight. I don't know why, because I always felt he would have beat Dillian Whyte pretty easily, pretty convincingly. Now, if he's struggling to land that right hand, if he's struggling to let it go, makes it a lot more competitive, because Dillian Whyte, he's been knocked out 3 times, badly as well, all times. Hasn't stopped him from letting the big shots go, hasn't stopped him from fighting and going for the jugular. So I think it would be an interesting fight. It would be an interesting match, Dillian Whyte, Deontay Wilder, as would Dillian Whyte against Joe Joyce, as would Dillian Whyte against Jarrell Miller, as would Dillian Whyte against Daniel Dubois. There's fights there for Dillian Whyte in the heavyweight division that I would be interested to see him in, but I wouldn't give him a sniff of a prayer in any of them, if that makes sense. I think Dillian Whyte, he's at the wrong side of 30 now. The failed tests, the knockout defeats, all that I think has put, and the hard fights as well, the ones that he has won, I think all that's put a lot of wear and tear miles on the clock. So if I was a Frank Warren, I'd be looking at Dillian Whyte and saying, let's do Dubois versus Whyte, let's do it in the O2, let's do it in the OVO. At the very least, we can run Magnificent 7 and headline that as the headline, or maybe we could push it ever so slightly onto pay-per-view. Who knows? But Dillian Whyte, the question is, what's next for him? Look, I'm not expecting miracles, but he's back in the heavyweight picture. He's going to be looking for the big fights. He's going to be angling for the big fights. He's already been to Saudi to fight when he fought Marius Vac, so he's going to be looking to go out there again and make some money. So it's going to be interesting to see what the plans are for Dillian Whyte, if he goes back and works with Eddie Hearn, because obviously there seems to be a bit of animosity there after the adverse analytical finding, we'll call it. So would he work for Eddie Hearn? Would he go to Frank? Would he go solo? Would he do his own dealing with the Saudis? Don't know. We're going to find this out in due course. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below on what you think the next move is for Dillian Whyte, and if you think that the Joshua fight, doing it in the UK, trying one last attempt to make that fight happen, would you think Eddie Hearn will do it? And who do you have in that fight? Because I nail my colours to the mast pretty quick and say Joshua will win by knockout pretty easily, probably 4 or 5 rounds, right? Could I be wrong? Possibly. I'm always open to being wrong. Does anyone else think Dillian Whyte gives Joshua troubles? Let me know in the comments. Hope you enjoyed it, people. Smash the like button if you could. Hit subscribe, of course, as always, if you haven't already. And for now, I'll leave it there. Peace.